Hello everyone, how are you all? Hope you all are doing well. So we would be very quickly doing what? Revision of registration chapter. So GST registration is what? PAN based, and it is what? State specific. State specific. One registration per state. One registration per state is what we do. But if the business entity has multiple place of business in the same state, then it is on their option, and it is optional that they can take separate registration for each place of business. Your PAN number is 10 digit, but your GSTIN is 15 digit. Out of that, in the middle 10 numbers are what? Of PAN number. Okay, so GSTIN is, the full form is GSTIN is Goods and Service Tax Identification Number. That is 15 digit number. And a certificate of registration is issued to you, which will contain what? GSTIN is made available to applicant on the common portal. Registration under GST, it is not tax specific. That is single registration for all the taxes. Single registration is required for all the taxes. Even if you have to pay CGST, SGST, IGST, UTGST, whatever, the registration will be obviously what? Not tax specific. Now, registration will depend upon your aggregate turnover limit. You have to take the registration if your aggregate turnover crosses the threshold limit. Okay, we'll see in each state what is the threshold limit, 20 lakhs or 40 lakhs, that we will see. Okay, and special category state, it is 10 lakhs. And who are earlier registered under earlier law will be registered under GST. So under when GST came in 2017, who were registered under excise VAT, they are migrated to the GST law. In case of transfer of business, transferee has to take the registration. In case of amalgamation, demerger by an order of the court, transferee is liable to be registered from the date from which registrar of company issues certificate with giving effect to the order of the High Court. Okay. Now, threshold limit, registration based on threshold limit. Okay, so if your this turnover is say 10 lakhs for goods and services both, if your states with threshold limit for 10 lakhs for goods and services both, what? MMT-N, that is Manipur, Mizoram, Tripura and Nagaland. MMT-N. Okay, so Manipur, Mizoram, Nagaland, Tripura. MMT-N. What is the limit? 10 lakhs. 10 lakhs for goods as well as services. The limit turnover, if your turnover exceeds 10 lakhs, then you have to take the registration. Then there are few states where the limit is 20 lakhs for goods as well as services. What are those states? UPS, MAT-UPS, Meghalaya. This is a memory technique. Meghalaya, then Arunachal Pradesh, then Telangana, then Uttarakhand, then Pondicherry, and then Sikkim. MAT-UPS. For MAT-UPS, what is the limit? 20 lakhs. 20 lakhs for goods as well as services. For goods as well as services, the limit is 20 lakhs. For MAT-UPS states, the limit is what? 20 lakhs for goods as well as the services. Then there are states with threshold limit of 20 lakh for services and 40 lakh for goods. 40 lakh for exclusive supply of goods and 20 lakh for services. What are those states? Jammu Kashmir, Assam, Himachal Pradesh, and all other states. What is the limit? 20 lakhs for services, 40 lakh for goods. 20 lakhs for services, 40 lakh for exclusive supply of goods. But if you are supplying goods as well as services, in that case limit is 20 lakhs. In which state? Jammu Kashmir, Assam, Himachal Pradesh, and all other states like Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, all, Gujarat and all. Okay. Now, aggregate turnover. So, this limit is of 20 lakhs, 40 lakhs. What we are talking is 10 lakhs is aggregate turnover. If your aggregate turnover exceeds, say 10 lakhs in case of MMT-N, then you are required to take the registration. So, what do you mean by aggregate turnover? So, this definition we have already done in composition scheme. We will quickly do it. So, aggregate turnover means it includes taxable supply. What it includes? It includes taxable supply. It includes exempt supply. Exempt supply means three things: nil rate of tax, wholly exempt from tax, and non-taxable supply. Okay, nil rate of tax, non-taxable supply, and wholly exempt supply. So this is what exempt supply. Then exports. Then interstate supply. Interstate supply of the person having same PAN. It is to be computed on all India basis. Okay. So aggregate turnover includes what? Taxable supply, exempt supply, exports, interstate supply of the person having same PAN, it is to be computed on all India basis, and it is to be computed on all India basis. However, it excludes GST, CGST, SGST, UTGST, IGST and compensation cess. It excludes GST, CGST, SGST, UTGST, IGST and compensation cess, and value of inward supply on which tax is payable under RCM. Value of inward supply on which tax is payable under RCM is to be excluded. Okay, so aggregate turnover includes taxable supply, exempt supply, exports, interstate supply of a person having same PAN to be computed on all India basis. However, it excludes GST, CGST, SGST, UTGST, IGST, compensation cess, and value of inward supply on which tax is payable under RCM. Value of inward supply on which tax is payable under RCM. Next, compulsory registration. Now, compulsory registration as per section 24. These are the cases of mandatory registration or compulsory registration. You have to take registration, boss. There is no option. You have to take registration. Even if your aggregate turnover does not exceed 10, 20 or 40 lakhs, doesn't matter. You have to take registration. So, these are the cases of mandatory registration. What are those? First, interstate supplier. If you are making interstate supply, you have to take registration. For example, I have supplied, I am in Maharashtra, I have supplied to Gujarat worth rupees 50,000 only, and my total turnover is say 2 lakhs rupees. Then also I am required to take registration. Why? Because I have done interstate supplies. So in case of interstate supply, you are compulsorily required to take registration. In case of interstate supply. Then what are the exception? Service supplier, if the aggregate turnover does not exceed 20 lakhs. Now, if you are a service supplier, if you are a supplier of service and your aggregate turnover does not exceed 20 lakhs rupees, then it is okay. So, for service supplier, for the supplier of service, they have given you the limit till 20 lakhs, not an issue. Till 20 lakhs, you are not required to compulsory take registration. Even if you are interstate supplying the services, then also you are not required to take registration. Okay, if you are a supplier of service and your aggregate turnover does not exceed 20 lakhs rupees, then you are not required to take registration. Then person making interstate supply of handicraft goods. If aggregate value of such supply to be computed on all India basis does not exceed 20 lakhs, 10 lakhs in case of specified special category states MMT-N. Okay, so what you are doing? You are doing interstate supply of handicraft goods. You are interstate supplying handicraft goods, and your aggregate value does not exceed 20 lakhs or 10 lakhs. And your aggregate value does not exceed 20 lakhs and 10 or 10 lakhs, then you are not required to take registration. Okay, so interstate from Maharashtra to Gujarat, I am supplying handicraft goods and my aggregate turnover is say 15 lakhs rupees, then I am not required to take registration. Okay, even if I am supplying interstate. Only in case of handicraft goods, if my aggregate turnover does not exceed 20 lakhs or 10 lakhs in case of special category states, that is MMT-N. Then person making interstate taxable supply of notified products when made by craftsmen. Now, if you are supplying notified products which are made by craftsmen, if aggregate value does not exceed 20 lakhs and your aggregate value does not exceed 20 lakhs, 10 lakhs in case of MMT-N, then also you are not required to take registration. So, these three cases. In case of interstate supply, generally you are required to take registration compulsory as per section 24. However, if you are interstate supplying the services, then you are not required to take registration first. Second, if you are if you are a supplier of interstate supplier of handicraft goods and your turnover does not exceed 20 lakhs or 10 lakhs, then you are not required to take registration. And third, you are interstate supplying notified products. When made by craftsmen and your aggregate turnover does not exceed 20 lakhs or 10 lakhs, then also you are not required to take registration. Okay, next, casual taxable person. Next is casual taxable person. Okay, so now you are a casual taxable person. If you are a casual taxable person, are you required to take compulsory registration? Yes, you are compulsorily required to take registration if you are a casual taxable person. Now, However, again, same 2 points. If you are supplying handicraft goods, if you are engaged, if you are a casual taxable person and supplying handicraft goods and your turnover does not exceed 20 lakhs or 10 lakhs in case of MMT-N, then you are not required to take registration. And third, if you are supplying what notified product when made by craftsmen and then your aggregate turnover does not exceed 20 lakhs or 10 lakhs, then also you are not required to take registration. Then third, person receiving supply, the tax on which is payable under RCM basis are compulsorily required to take registration. Person who is required to pay tax under 95, you remember the ECO is required to those who are required to pay tax under 95 like transportation of passenger if supplied through ECO. You remember all those cases. So those who are required to take registration as per 95. Those who are required to pay tax as per 95, sorry. Those who are required to pay tax as per 95 are required to take compulsory registration. Then the one who are required to deduct TDS under section 51, the government departments and all PSU, those who are required to deduct TDS under section 51, those are required to take compulsory registration. TDS under GST Act. Okay, there is a separate lecture of TDS that you can refer. Okay, please strictly follow the playlist. All the lectures, all the videos are given in the playlist. Okay, those who are required to deduct tax under section 51, then NRTP. If you are a NRTP, non-resident taxable person, you are a non-resident taxable person, okay, then you are compulsory required to take registration. Okay, you have come from outside India, you are doing business in our country, okay, take registration. Okay, and discharge tax, if you are an NRTP, you have to take registration. Next point we'll do in the end only. Okay, then a person who supply on behalf of some other taxable person, you are supplying on behalf of some other taxable person, you are an agent, compulsory required to take registration. ISD, input service distributor, whether or not separately registered under this act, compulsory required to take registration. ECO, you are an ECO, electronic commerce operator, who is required to collect TCS under section 52, compulsorily required to take registration. You are a supplier of OIDR service, online information database access retrieval services, compulsorily required to take registration. Then every person supplying online money gaming from a place outside India to a person in India. Now you are supplying online money gaming from a place outside India to a person in India, compulsorily required to take registration. Then a person, class of person notified by central government, state government. Now you are a person or class of person who is notified by central government, state government is compulsorily required to take registration. So in all these cases you are compulsorily required to take registration. Now, who are the person not liable for registration? So if you are a person engaged exclusively in supplying goods or services not liable to tax, so you are supplying goods or services not liable to tax, compulsorily required to take, not required to take registration. You are not required to take registration. Section 23 tells about person not liable for registration. So who are the person not liable for registration? If you are exclusively engaged in supplying goods or services not liable to tax, then you are not required to take registration. Then you are engaged in exclusively supplying goods or services wholly exempt from tax, then you are also not required to take registration. Then you are an agriculturalist. What you are an agriculturalist, limited to supply of produce out of cultivation of land, then you are compulsorily then you are not required to take registration. And then specific category of person notified by government, they are not required to take registration. Okay, so if you are engaged exclusively in supplying goods services not liable to tax, or you are engaged exclusively in supplying goods or services exempt from tax, or you are an agriculturist, you are not required to take registration. You are not required to take registration. Where and by when to apply for registration? Now when and where you are required to take registration? So registration, you are required to take registration in every state, union territory in which he is so liable, in every state, union territory in which he is so liable, within 30 days from the day on which he become liable for registration. How many days, within how many days you have to take registration? Within 30 days from the day you become liable for registration, you have to take registration in the state or union territory in which you are liable, in the state or union territory in which you are liable. Okay, and the casual taxable person or NRTP, if you are a casual taxable person or a NRTP, then every state, union territory in which he is so liable, at least 5 days prior to the commencement of business, you have to take registration 5 days prior to the commencement of the business. 5 days prior to the commencement of the business, if you are a casual taxable person and non-resident taxable person, then you have to take registration in the state, union territory in which you are so liable at least 5 days prior to the commencement of business. At least 5 days prior to the commencement of business. Okay. And then there are cases of voluntary registration. And UIN. unique identity number. So voluntary registration, the person who is not liable for registration under 22-24, neither his aggregate turnover exceeds threshold limit, nor he is coming under any of the provisions of compulsory registration, then also he wants to take registration, okay, he can take it. So he can get himself registered voluntarily. In that case, he can get himself registered voluntarily. UIN, in respect of supply to some notified agencies of UNO, in respect of supplies to notified agencies of United Nations Organization, multinational financial institute, other organization, a UIN, and UIN is issued. Okay, so the to them what is issued? UIN, unique identification number. To multinational financial institute or UNO, the UIN is issued. Okay, next, effective date of registration. Effective date of registration. Now if you are submitting the application within 30 days of you becoming liable for registration, you are submitting the application within 30 days of you becoming liable for registration, what is the effective date of registration in that case? In that case, effective date of registration will be date on which he becomes liable for registration, date on which he become liable for registration. But if application is submitted after 30 days, if you are submitting the application after 30 days of applicant become liable for registration, effective date of registration is date of grant of registration. Date of grant of registration would be the effective date of registration. Now optional registration. Person having multiple place of business, person having multiple place of business in a state or union territory may obtain what? Separate registration for each place of business. May obtain separate registration for each place of business. So if you have a multiple place of business, then you can obtain separate registration for each place of business. If one of the place of business pay tax under normal levy, no other place of business will be granted registration under composition scheme. Okay, so if one of your place of business is paying tax under normal levy, then no other place of business will be granted registration under composition levy. Okay, so this we have already discussed in composition chapter as well. Then there is a concept of suo motu registration. So we have seen, registration under section 22, then 24, then voluntary registration we have seen. Now this is suo motu registration, means if there is any survey, inquiry, inspection, search proceedings, then the officer finds that you are liable for registration. Officer finds, oh, there is a turnover of 5 crore, you are liable for registration, but you have not taken the registration. Or you are making continuous interstate supply, but you have not taken the registration. Then officer will what do? Then officer finds that a person liable for registration has failed to apply for registration. He may register the person on a temporary basis and issue an order. Then officer will get you registered. That is called as suo motu registration. Suo motu registration. Next, what is the procedure for registration? So up till now the portion which we have seen is undoubtedly important. Now these are simple procedural. These are simple procedural things. Okay. So what is the procedure for registration? We will see. Every person liable to get registered and the person seeking voluntary registration shall, before applying for registration, declare his PAN number and state union territory in part A of form GST REG 01 on the common portal. So if you are a person liable to get registered, and the person seeking voluntary registration shall, before applying for registration, he has to declare what? PAN number and state in part A of GST REG 01. Then PAN number is validated by what? The PAN number will be validated by CBDT database, and it will also be verified through separate OTPs. It will also be verified through separate OTPs sent to PAN link mobile number and email address. PAN link mobile number and email address. Okay. Then TRN number will be generated, temporary reference number. TRN number is generated and it is communicated to applicant on validated mobile number and email address. On validated mobile number and email address, what will be generated? TRN, temporary reference number will be generated. Temporary reference number will be generated. Using TRN, applicant shall electronically submit application in part B of application form. Then he will use TRN number, temporary reference number, and he will submit what? Application in part B of application form along with the documents. What is the details contained in part B? Very simple, like constitution of business, jurisdiction, option for composition, date of commencement of business, reason to obtain registration, address of principal place of business, what is the nature of activity you are carrying out, details of additional place of business, details of bank account, details of authorized signatory, and all these things. So using TRN you have to electronically submit the application, filing the part B, and the part B contains all these details. Okay. On receipt of the application, an acknowledgement is issued. Whenever your application is received, an acknowledgement is issued in the prescribed form shall be issued to applicant electronically. Okay, a casual taxable person applying for registration gets a TRN for making an advance deposit of tax in the electronic cash ledger. An acknowledgement is issued only after the said deposit. Okay, so the casual taxable person gets the TRN for making what? Advance deposit of tax. What deposit they have to do? You remember, they have to make advance deposit of estimated tax liability. Estimated tax liability. Now your application will be forwarded to the proper officer. Now what the officer will do, we'll see in the next diagram. Now your application is forwarded to proper officer. Okay, now your officer will do what? He will examine the application and accompanying document. He will examine the application and accompanying document. If the same are found in order, then registration will be granted within 7 working days from the date of submission of application. The registration will be granted from 7 working days from the date of submission of application without site verification if the applicant successfully validates his Aadhaar authentication. However, if any of these three scenario are there, that means applicant fails to undergo Aadhaar authentication, or does not opt for Aadhaar authentication, or officer feels it necessary to carry out site verification, or a person has where a person has undergone Aadhaar authentication is identified on the common portal based on data analysis and risk parameters to carry out physical site verification. In all of these cases, registration will be granted within 30 days of the application after verification of site and prescribed document. So in all these cases, registration will be granted within 30 days of application. Registration will be granted within 30 days of application after site verification and prescribed documents. Okay. Now, so this is when your application is found in order. However, if the application is not found in order, then the officer will issue what? He will issue notice, thereby seeking clarification information document from the applicant electronically. So in this case, officer will issue what? Notice. Officer will issue notice, thereby seeking clarification information document from the applicant electronically within 30 days from application submission date. Within how many days you have to issue the notice? You have to issue the notice within 30 days from the application submission date. Within 30 days you have to issue the notice. Okay, for clarification information document. In again these 3 cases, which one 3 cases? If you fails to undergo Aadhaar authentication, or you does not offer Aadhaar authentication, or officer finds it's necessary to do site verification, or you are identified based on common portal, based on risk analysis and data analysis, risk parameters, you are identified. So in all these cases, within 30 days from the submission of application, from application submission date, what you have to do? You have to actually issue notice. You have to issue notice in the officer will issue notice within 30 days from the application submission date in any of these cases, or other than these 3 cases, he has to issue, if he wants to issue the notice, he has to issue the notice within 7 working days. Within 7 working days from application submission date, he will issue the notice. Now if the applicant has furnished clarification information document within 7 days from the receipt of notice, whenever the applicant receives the notice, 30 days, 7 days, as the case may be, and he has furnished his reply, he has furnished the information documents required by the officer within 7 working days from receipt of notice, and if the officer is satisfied with it, then he will grant registration within 7 days of the receipt of the information clarification. What he is going to do in that case? He will grant the registration. But if the officer is not satisfied, or the applicant has not furnished the reply within 7 working days, then in that case, officer will reject the application for reasons to be recorded in writing. So in that case, proper officer will reject the application for reasons to be recorded in writing. Okay, and deemed approval of the application. So in this case, deemed approval of application. So in any of these cases, like the 30 days, 7 days time, whatever is the given to the officer, if he has not replied on that time, then in that case it will be assumed, that what? It will be deemed approval of the application, that officer has approved the application. If he has not he has not taken the actions of the time limits prescribed, like he has not issued the notice, or he has not granted the registration within 7 working days, whatever as the case may be, 30 days, 7 days. So if he has not taken the action, like not issued the notice or not granted the registration, so it will be deemed approval. It will be deemed that officer has done the so. Next, rule 25 we will see. So, where the officer is satisfied that physical verification is required after. What? After the grant of registration. If officer want, he can verify your premises. Yes, definitely. Then, date of such verification. After the grant of registration, the date of verification, he may get such verification of place of business done and verification report along with other documents including photographs. He has to upload within a period of 15 working days from the date of such verification. So within 15 days of the 15 working days from the date of verification, what he has to do, he has to upload the verification report along with other documents. When the officer is satisfied that physical verification is required after grant of registration. Physical verification is required after grant of registration. Okay, but now where the physical verification of place of business is required before grant of registration. If the physical verification of place of business is required in the circumstances specified in provision to rule 9(1), these were the circumstances. You remember all these three cases. So in this case, the officer will get such verification of place of business done, and again he has to upload what? Verification report along with the other documents including photographs will be uploaded on the common portal at least 5 working days prior to the completion of time period specified. So there is both the possibility. The physical verification officer will choose whether he has to do after grant of registration or before grant of registration in the circumstances specified. Okay. In both the cases, he has to upload what? Verification report along with other documents and the photographs. Now, amendment of registration. Can your registration be amended? Yes. Very well, your registration can be amended. So, there are amendments with respect to core fields also, non-core fields also, like email address and this mobile number. These all are non-core fields. These are updated immediately. Okay, officers, interference is not required in this. So, except for changing some core field in the registration, a taxable person will be able to make amendments without requiring specific approval from the tax authority. So, except core fields, that means in case of non-core fields, amendment can be done without specific approval from the tax authority. In case of change is for legal name of business or state of place of business or additional place of business, the taxable person will apply for amendment within 15 days even necessitating the change. So, in case there is a change of legal name of the business or for place of business, additional place of business, in all these cases you have to apply for the change within 15 days of the change. The officer will approve the amendment within next 15 days. For all other changes like name of day-to-day function, email ID, mobile number, these all non-core fields, no approval of the officer is required, and amendment can be affected by the taxable person on his own on the common portal. Okay. Permission of officer is required if change relates to core field of information. Now, if the change is relating to what? Relating to the core field of information, then in this case, like the legal name of business, the address of principal place of business, or addition, deletion, retirement of partner, directors, karta, managing committee, board of trustee, chief executive officer responsible for day-to-day affairs of the business, in all these cases, this change does not warrant cancellation of registration. The change of particular shall be applicable for all registration obtained under provisions under same PAN. So these are all what? These are the core fields. These all are the core field. So in case of core field, what will happen? We'll see in the diagram in both the cases what will happen. Like if you are a registered person or UIN and there is a change, then you have to submit the application within 15 days of the change. Whatever is the change, you have to submit the application within 15 days of the change to the common portal. If it is relating to non-core area, then registration certificate will stand amended, not a problem. But if it relates to core area, then officer has to give permission. Officer has checked, he has given permission within 15 days, no problem. Registration certificate will be amended. But if the officer is of the opinion that the amendment is unwarranted, or documents are incomplete, incorrect, in that case he will issue a show cause notice. Why application for amendment should not be rejected. If the registered person replies to the notice within 7 working days and his reply is satisfactory, then within 7 working days of the receipt of the reply, your registration certificate will be amended. If he does not reply to the notice or his reply is not satisfactory, then his application will be rejected. And the officer has to take actions within 15 days, 7 days, and if he does not take, then it is deemed to be taken. It is deemed to be taken. Okay. Now, in case of casual taxable person, non-resident taxable person, you remember casual taxable person, non-resident taxable person. Who is a casual taxable person? A person who has registered place in some state in India but want to effect supply from other place in which he is not having any fixed place of business. Okay. And such person needs to register in a state from here where he seeks to supply a casual taxable person. Who is a NRTP, non-resident taxable person, is one who is a foreigner and he occasionally wants to effect supply from a state in India. If from that he needs GST registration. Okay, so if you are a casual taxable person or a non-resident taxable person, there are special provisions with regard to registration and all. They have to apply for registration within 5 days in advance before making any supply. Within 5 days, at least 5 days before making any supply, he has to apply for registration. Registration is granted to them, or a period of operation is extended only if they make advance deposit. They have to make advance deposit of estimated tax liability. Registration granted is for the period specified in registration application, or 90 days from the effective date of registration, Okay. Next is cancellation of registration. Now, cancellation you can do on your own account or officer can cancel your registration. Both possibilities are there. When you will do on your own account, we will see like these cases: transfer, discontinuance of business, full transfer of business, death of a proprietor, amalgamation, demerger, disposal, change in constitution, no longer liable to be registered. In all these cases, on your own motion, you will apply for cancellation. Okay. Transfer, death, amalgamation, demerger, disposal, change in constitution, no longer liable to be registered. And during the pendency of the registration, during the pendency of proceeding relating to cancellation, the registration will be suspended. Okay, during the pendency of proceeding, your registration will be suspended. The suspension shall be deemed to be revoked upon furnishing of all the pending returns. As soon as you furnishes all the pending returns, your suspension will be deemed to be revoked. Now, cancellation is possible even from the earlier date. When is cancellation possible from the earlier date? When you have contravented the provision of GST law. Cancellation is possible from the earlier date if you have contravented the provisions of the GST law. What are the prescribed contravention? So, prescribed contravention is which make a registered person liable for cancellation of registration. So, these are the contraventions. Given prescribed contravention in which a registered person liable for cancellation of registration. If registered person do not conduct business from the declared place of business, you have declared a place of business in your registration certificate and you are not carrying out business from there, then your registration will be liable for cancellation. Then you are issuing invoice or bill of supply without supply of goods or services. You are not supplying goods or services and you are issuing invoice. Okay, fake invoices. So, then your registration can be cancelled by officer. In all these cases, officer will cancel your registration. Okay. You violated the provisions of section 171, anti-profiteering measures. We will study very soon in final. Okay. So, definitely we will be studying very soon in final. You have done a lot of hard work. Very soon you will be in finals. Okay. So, you have violated the provision of section 171. Then you have violated 10A. Your violation of the condition of taking ITC, violating the conditions for taking ITC. There is a mismatch of GST 1 and 3B. There is violation of 86B. You are a monthly return filer and not furnished return for a continuous period of 6 months. You are a quarterly return filer and you have not furnished a return for 2 tax period. In all these cases, these all are what prescribed contraventions. So, all these cases, officer can cancel your registration. Okay, officer can cancel your registration. You're a composition dealer, okay, you're a composition dealer, you have not furnished return for a financial year beyond 3 months from the due date of furnishing return. What is the due date? 30th April of next year. After that 3 months have also elapsed, you have not furnished the return, then also your registration can be cancelled by officer. Other dealers has not furnished return for a continuous period as may be prescribed. This we have already seen, these 2 points. Then your voluntary registration you have taken and business you have not commenced within 6 months from the take of taking registration. You have taken the registration voluntary but you have not commenced the business in 6 months from the date of taking registration. You have obtained the registration by fraud, willful misstatement or suppression of facts. In all these cases, officer can cancel your registration even from an earlier date. Officer will determine. And if your registration is cancelled, then ITC you have to pay. This we have already discussed in ITC chapter. You have to pay ITC of the inputs in stock containing semi-finished goods, finished goods or capital goods, plant and machinery or output tax, whichever is higher. So the point, the ITC reversal we have already discussed. Now, when your registration is cancelled, okay, cancellation of registration, the cancellation of registration will not affect the liability of the person prior to cancellation to pay tax and other dues or to discharge obligation irrespective of time of determination, either before or after cancellation. Now, for example, my registration is cancelled on 1st July. So, before 1st July, like for April, May, June, for example, I have to pay taxes. I have to pay taxes even if this is determined on 30th August. That doesn't make a difference. That doesn't make a difference. Okay. So, prior to the period of cancellation, obviously, I have to pay tax whenever the officer determined. That doesn't make a difference. Okay. Next, suspension of registration. So, during the period of your registration, for example, there are 2 situations when the registered person has applied for cancellation. You are a registered person, you have applied for cancellation on your own motion. In that case, your registration will be suspended from which date? Date of submission of application, or date from which cancellation is sought, whichever is later. Okay, date of submission of application or date from which cancellation is sought, whichever is later, pending the completion of proceedings for cancellation of registration. Pending the completion of the proceedings of the cancellation of registration, your registration will be suspended. So, where a registered person has applied for cancellation of registration, then the date of submission of application or date from which cancellation is sought, whichever is later. Pending completion of proceeding of cancellation of registration. But where the cancellation of registration has been initiated by department on your own motion, initiated by the department on their own motion, then with effect from the date to be determined by proper officer pending the completion of proceedings for the cancellation of registration. So, with effect from a date to be determined by the officer pending the completion proceedings for cancellation of registration. Okay, your registration will be suspended for this much period. Okay, with effect from a date to be determined by the officer. Now, where there is a comparison of returns by the registered person under section 39, like your 3B, when compare your 3B with GST 1 or 2A or such other analysis. So, comparing GST or 3B with 1 or 2A or such other analysis show significant difference or anomalies. There are too much difference, indicating contravention leading to cancellation of registration. Officer is thinking that there is like too much differences, which indicates contravention leading to, like, some contravention of law you have done, it leads to cancellation of registration. Or there is contravention of 10A, that is, you are required to furnish the bank account but you have not furnished, then your registration will be suspended. He shall be issued a notice within 30 days as to why registration should not be cancelled. So, officer will suspend his registration and he will issue a notice to him why your registration cannot be cancelled. During the period when your registration officer has suspended, okay, whenever your registration is suspended, then shall not make any taxable supply. You should not make any taxable supply during the period of suspension. During the full period of suspension, you should not make any taxable supply. What do you mean by you should not make any taxable supply? Means that registered person shall not issue tax invoice. He shall not issue tax invoice and not charge tax on supply made by him during the period of suspension. So he should not issue tax invoice. He should not issue tax invoice and not charge tax on supply made by him, and not charge tax on supply made by him. So he should not make any taxable supply. He shall not make any taxable supply, and he shall not be required to furnish any return under section 39. And he shall not be required to furnish any return under section 39 means revised tax invoice and first return in respect of supply made during the period of suspension will apply. However, revised tax invoice and first return will apply. Okay, so obviously during the period of suspension you are not required to issue any, you are not required to make any taxable supply. See, you will make supply. Okay, obviously you are doing business, you will make sale, but you will not make taxable supply. That means you will not issue tax invoice, nor you will charge taxes. And secondly, you are not required to furnish any return. But later on, revised tax invoice and first return will apply. Where cancellation is initiated by department, if department has initiated the cancellation and registration suspended, such person shall not be granted any refund. So if your cancellation is initiated by the department, and your registration is suspended, then that person will not be granted any refund, obviously. Okay? Suspension is deemed to be revoked upon completion of cancellation proceedings. Revocation is effective from the date suspension has come to effect. Suspension shall be deemed to be revoked upon furnishing of all pending return. Why your registration was suspended? Because you have not furnished the return. So in this case, your suspension will be revoked upon furnishing of all the pending returns. Okay. So these were the important points regarding suspension, and we have done cancellation. Now revocation of cancellation. What is revocation of cancellation? We will see. Now, you are a registered person whose registration is cancelled by proper officer on his own motion. Your registration is cancelled by the proper officer on your own motion. Okay, you are a registered person. Your registration is cancelled by proper officer on his own motion. Then he may submit an application for revocation of cancellation within 90 days. Within 90 days from the date of service of order of cancellation, or within such time as extended by AC, JC for a further period not exceeding 180 days. Okay. So if you are a registered person whose registration is cancelled by the proper officer, then he will submit the application for revocation within a period of 90 days from the service of order of cancellation, or within such time not exceeding 180 days. So maximum is 90 plus 180 days. Okay. Now, deemed a revocation of suspended GST registration upon furnishing of all pending returns by the taxpayer. Now there will be deemed a revocation of suspended registration. Now if your registration has been suspended and now you have furnished all the returns, then what will happen? There will be deemed revocation of suspended registration upon furnishing of pending returns where registration was suspended due to non-filing of returns beyond a period of 3 months after the due date in case of composition taxpayer, and for returns for such continuous period as may be prescribed by registered person subject to the condition that registration has not been cancelled. So if in short, if you have furnished all the pending returns and your registration was suspended, why? Because you have not furnished the return. So now your registration will be deemed to be revoked upon furnishing of all the returns. Okay. Bank account details may be furnished after obtaining registration certificate. Rule 10A. So the registered person after obtaining registration is allowed to furnish what? The bank account details. Within how many days he can furnish the bank account details? Within 30 days from the grant of registration. Or before furnishing details of outward supply. In GSTR 1 or IFF, whichever is earlier. So what he has to do? He has to furnish the bank account details. Next. Aadhaar authentication. Very quickly we will see. In this, only one thing that is more important is person who are not liable for Aadhaar authentication. So a person who is the citizen of India, department or establishment of central government, state government, central government, local authority, statutory body, PSU, person applying for UIN. These all are the person who are not liable for Aadhaar authentication, not liable for Aadhaar authentication. So a person who is not a citizen of India, department or establishment of central government, state government, local authority, statutory body, public sector undertaking, and the person applying for UN, these persons are not required, not liable for Aadhaar authentication, not liable for Aadhaar authentication. Okay. Next is Aadhaar authentication for fresh applicant being other than individual, or Aadhaar authentication for fresh applicant being individual. So in both these cases, while submission of application for registration, an applicant shall undergo Aadhaar authentication. An applicant has to undergo Aadhaar authentication in both of these cases. What those cases? If you are a fresh applicant being individual, or you are a fresh applicant being other than individual. In both of these cases, while submitting the application, when you are submitting registration application only, at that time only you can undergo Aadhaar authentication. If you do Aadhaar authentication, you have done Aadhaar authentication, and then the date of submission of application, what would be considered as date of submission of application? Date of authentication, earlier of date of authentication of Aadhaar number, or 15 days from the submission of application, or 15 days from the submission of application. Okay, whichever is earlier. So date of submission of application will be earlier of date of authentication of Aadhaar number, or 15 days from the submission of application, or 15 days from the submission of application, whichever is earlier, But if you fails to do Aadhaar authentication, or you does not opt for Aadhaar authentication, in that case, what is there? The notice in GST Reg 03 may be issued not later than 30 days from the submission, from the date of submission. So the notice in what? Notice in Reg 03 may be issued not later than 30 days from the date of submission of application. So if you fails to do Aadhaar authentication, or you does not opt for Aadhaar authentication, in that case of the notice will be issued not later than what? 30 days from the date of submission of application. We have already seen in second diagram. And the registration will be granted after physical verification, and the verification report and other documents will be uploaded on the common portal. So this part we have already seen. Okay, so this were few points regarding what? Aadhaar authentication. Now, risk-based Aadhaar authentication of registered applicant pilot project in Gujarat. Now it is extended to Pondicherry and Andhra Pradesh also. So what is this? Risk-based biometric Aadhaar authentication. Risk-based biometric Aadhaar authentication of the registered application. So now what is this? Now this project was in Gujarat. Now it has been extended to Pondicherry as well as Andhra Pradesh. So what is this? We'll see. So biometric based Aadhaar authentication of high risk applicant who has opted. So now you have opted for Aadhaar authentication. You are a high risk applicant. So now for them this Aadhaar authentication on a pilot process project basis has been started in Gujarat. So now you have opted for Aadhaar authentication. You are identified by common portal. On what basis you are identified? On the basis of data analysis and risk parameters. You are identified. Then it shall be followed by a biometric based Aadhaar authentication. Then it will be followed by biometric based Aadhaar authentication by taking what? Photograph. By taking photograph of the applicant where applicant is individual, So then it will be what? Then it will be the applicant who has opted for the Aadhaar authentication and he is identified by the common portal based on data analysis risk parameters. So it will be followed by biometric based Aadhaar authentication. You know, biometric based Aadhaar, retina, thumb impression, all these things. Okay. So biometric based Aadhaar authentication will be done. Photograph will be taken. Whose photograph? If the applicant is individual, applicants. If the applicant is not individual, then of such individuals, like for example in case of HUF Karta, in case of partnership firm, partners, and so on. Along with verification of original copy of documents, along with what? Verification of original copy of documents uploaded with the application in GST Reg 01 at one of the notified felicitation center. So it will be done along with what? Verification of original copy of documents, Okay. The application shall be deemed to be complete only after completion of the process laid down here. So when the application will be deemed to be complete? Only after the completion of the process laid down here. An acknowledgement will be issued to the applicant after completion of biometric based Aadhaar authentication, and an acknowledgement will be issued to the applicant also after what? Completion of the biometric based Aadhaar authentication. The above Biometric based Aadhaar authentication of high risk applicant who opt for authentication of Aadhaar number has been extended to Pondicherry as well as Andhra Pradesh. It has been extended to Pondicherry, Andhra Pradesh. So now 3 states, Gujarat, Pondicherry, Andhra Pradesh, their biometric based Aadhaar authentication is done of high risk individual. Those who has applied for Aadhaar authentication, they are identified by common portal based on data analysis and risk parameters. So biometric based Aadhaar authentication will be done of applicant where the applicant is individual, of such individual where the applicant is not individual, along with verification of copy of the document uploaded in the application at one of the felicitation center, okay. So this is what biometric based Aadhaar authentication. Now next, Aadhaar authentication for registered person, okay. So the registered person, if you are a registered person other than person notified under 25(6)(d) who has been issued certificate of registration, he will undergo Aadhaar authentication of Aadhaar number in order to be eligible for the following. So if you are already registered person, you are already GST registered person, now if you want to go for Aadhaar authentication, then you have to undergo Aadhaar authentication if you want to be eligible for these 3 things. What 3 things? If you want to file application for revocation of cancellation of registration, or application for refund application, or refund of IGST paid on goods exported out of India. So any of these three, you have to go for Aadhaar authentication. If you are a already registered person, if you want to do any of these 3 things, you have to go for Aadhaar authentication. If the Aadhaar has not been assigned to the person undergo Aadhaar authentication, for example, you don't have the Aadhaar number, then you have to furnish the following. What? Your Aadhaar enrollment ID slip, that enrollment ID slip which you will apply for Aadhaar number, that at that time you get. Then bank passbook along with photograph, voter identity card issued by Election Commission of India, passport or driving license issued by the licensing authority. So these documents you have to submit. Okay. Such person shall undergo the authentication of Aadhaar number. You have to undergo the authentication of what? Aadhaar number within a period of what? 30 days. Within a period of 30 days from the allotment of Aadhaar number, you have to undergo Aadhaar authentication. Okay. So this is what the provisions for Aadhaar authentication. Not very important from exam point of view. Okay. Just see this chart, that is more than sufficient. Next, unregistered person. If you are an unregistered person with an aggregate turnover up to threshold limit, permitted to supply goods through ECU. Special procedure to be followed by ECU in respect of supply of goods through them by such unregistered person. Okay. So unregistered person, you are an unregistered person with an aggregate turnover up to threshold limit. You are permitted to supply goods through ECU. So now what is this? So you remember, it will go to compulsory registration once. I'll tell you. We have left one point over there. So earlier the point was, if you are supplying goods or services through ECU is required to collect tax at source, you were required to compulsory take registration. But now they have come up with the exception. Okay, now if you are aggregate turnover, now you are exempted from obtain registration to the persons having aggregate turnover not exceeding 20 lakhs or 10 lakhs in case of MMT-N. Okay, so now they have come up with, now the threshold limit is applicable. Now the threshold limit is applicable for supplier of goods as well as services through ECU. So now if you are supplying goods or services through ECU, previously it was under compulsory registration. Now threshold limit is being given to them, to goods as well as services. Okay, now what is this? So now but in case of goods, there are few conditions that you have to satisfy. In case of services, you are exempted from obtaining registration up to threshold limit, even if you are supplying through ECU. But in case of goods, there are few conditions. What are those conditions? We will see. Now, person making supply of goods through ECU who is required to collect TCS under section 52. So now you are supplying what? Goods through ECU. What you are doing? You are supplying goods through ECU who is required to collect TCS under section 52. Having an aggregate turnover in the preceding financial year and current year not exceeding the threshold limit are exempted from obtaining registration subject to the following condition. That means what? Now you are supplying goods through ECU. who is required to collect TCS under section 52, and your aggregate turnover in the preceding year or current year is not exceeding the threshold limit. Your aggregate turnover in the preceding last year as well as current year is not exceeding the threshold limit. Then you are exempted from obtaining registration. Subject to the following conditions. Okay. So you are an unregistered person, you are supplying through ECO, then you are exempted from obtaining registration if your turnover is up to threshold limit. But if you are exempted, when you are exempted, if you satisfy the following condition, then only you are exempted. What are those conditions? That we will see. Shall not make any interstate supply of goods. You should not make any interstate supply of goods. You shall not make any interstate supply of goods first. Then you shall not make any supply of goods through ECO in more than one state or union territory. More than one state or union territory, you should not make a supply. Then third, shall be required to have a PAN issued under the Income Tax Act. You shall be required to issue a PAN under the Income Tax Act. PAN under the Income Tax Act. Okay. Shall, before making any supply of goods through ECO, declare on the common portal. These three things you have to declare on the common portal. What? PAN number, address of their place of business, state, union, territory in which such person seek to make such supply. Okay. Which shall be subject to validation on the common portal. Shall, before making any supply of goods through ECO, declare on the common portal your PAN number, address of the place of business and state, union, territory in which such person seeks to make supply, which shall be subjected to validation by the common portal. He shall have been granted an enrollment number on the common portal on successful validation of the PAN declared above. You have been granted what? Enrollment number. You have been granted enrollment number on the common portal on successful validation of the PAN declared above. Okay. So you will be granted an enrollment number. Shall not be granted more than one enrollment number. Obviously, in one state, union, territory, you will not be granted more than one enrollment number. No supply of goods shall be made by ECO unless such person have been granted enrollment number. Okay. No supply of goods until unless they get enrollment number. Where such person are subsequently granted registration under section 25, enrollment numbers will be ceased to be valid from the effective date of registration. So when subsequently you have been granted registration, number, then your enrollment number ceased to be valid. Then it will be ceased to be valid from the effective date of registration. Okay, so if you are an unregistered person, you are supplying through ECO, you will be exempted from registration up to threshold limit when you are not making interstate supply, you are not making supply in more than one state through ECO, you have a PAN, then you declare the following three things: the PAN number, the address, state, union, territory, which will be subject to validation. Then you will be granted enrollment number, not more than one enrollment number will be granted, only one enrollment number will be granted. That means then you should not make supply until unless you have been granted enrollment number, and your enrollment number will be ceased to be valid from the effective date of registration. Okay. Then the ECO who is required to collect TCS, under section 52 has been notified as class of person who shall follow the following special procedure in respect of supply of goods made through it by the unregistered person. Okay. So if you are a ECO who is required to collect TCS under section 52, has been notified as class of person who shall follow the following. ECO has to follow the special procedure. What is the special procedure in respect of these unregistered person? ECO will allow supply of goods through it by the said person only if enrollment number has been allotted on the common portal. Only if enrollment number has been allotted to you. Then only ECO will allow you to supply goods. ECO shall not allow any interstate supply of goods through it by the said person. ECO shall not allow him what? Interstate supply of goods, he shall not allow him. Then ECO shall not collect tax at source under section 52 in respect of supply of goods made through it by the said person. ECO shall not collect what? TCS. ECO shall not collect TCS in respect of supply of goods made through it. ECO shall furnish details of supply of goods made through it by the said person in GST rate electronically on the common portal. And ECO will furnish what? Details of supply of goods made through it. By the said person in the GST rate electronically on the common portal. Okay, by the said person in the form GST rate electronically on the common portal. So 4 things what ECO has to remember is: only if enrollment number is granted, then only he will allow him to supply goods. Shall not allow interstate supply of goods, shall not collect TCS, and furnish the details in GSTR rate, and furnish the details in GSTR rate. Okay, so this is the special procedure to be followed by ECO if some unregistered persons are supplying goods through it, and they will be exempted from registration only if they follow satisfy the following conditions. Okay, so here we complete one of the very procedural simple chapter, registrations under GST. Okay, many a times in exam question come for calculation of aggregate turnover, within how many days you are required to take registration, what is the effective date of registration, all these things, compulsory registration. From any of these aspects, generally the question comes in the exam. Okay, so maintain full confidence, write a very nice paper, and all the very best. Thank you for now. Bye bye.